Hello and welcome back. This is ProTaleDev back with another development video, and this time we're going to be breaking down everything I worked on during 2021. This recap is really for me and for anyone who's interested, but it's just to look back and see, you know, kind of the developments that I've worked on and to really reflect. I feel like this recap will really help me evaluate my progress as a developer. This video should be coming out around about New Year's, so either New Year's Day or a few days after. If so, Happy New Year. I hope everyone's enjoying themselves, trying their best to forget how terrible this year was, and hopefully celebrating the fact that maybe next year will be better. The first thing I want to do is actually just show quickly that the last development highlights video that I did actually led off from enhanced version of Corrupting Spring, and we have our development recap right here, which also looks back and talks about the enhanced version. Now, the development highlights video doesn't cover the Christmas related stuff, so the things I did in December. That's because I created this during November, and so it's missing that December game jam. So I'll quickly talk about that first. So we had the right gift for the Oxcast Game Jam 2020, and I did a day 1, day 2 video just covering it. It was a 2-day game jam, and I believe the idea was that I created a hide and seek style game, essentially surrounding the fact that maybe you could play as a split screen. I played around with the concept of, you know, making them active and deactive for a split screen mode to try and really bring that to light and see how I do. Ultimately, I had a lot of fun with this game jam. It was really fun. So that was during December. So the next thing I did after December was we went into January, and that was a little bit of a silent month, mainly because I was working on my website. I'll show the website towards the end after this, but the website needs a lot of work. I'll be doing the same thing, so a quick mention that in January I will be having a bit of a break, but that's fine. It means I can have a little bit of a break from development, which everybody needs a little bit of a break every now and again. After this, Frozen Chains comes out. I do mention it in the highlights video, but that was during the plans for it to be released. It wasn't actually out yet. So we released Frozen Chains. This was the final update to the Turtle Trails game and my official end to development on it. So I really worked hard. There's a lot of stuff in it that I worked on. After January, I came back after a break. I worked on the website. The website I created covers everything that I did in university from my first, second and third year, and everything that I covered post-university. So all the way up to the most recent stuff. We've got obviously the Dungeon Farm Tycoon. We are missing the December game, so it needs a little bit of an update. It's missing a little bit of stuff. So after January, I realised that there was still a video that I hadn't uploaded to YouTube yet about a university project that I wanted to cover, and that was the VR experience. I had a lot to talk about, but I just didn't know when to really do it, or if I should even create a video on the VR experience, since it wasn't my best programming experience, but it was still something I worked on regardless and worked hard on, so I figured I would show it, and it was the last video I covered for university. Next we had the Bean Jam 9. This was a 3-hour game jam. I really wanted to test my coding skills to see how quickly I could create a game, and ultimately try my best to see if I could create something. 3 hours was not a lot of time, and so I ended up struggling towards the end. It ended up just being a simple click shooter game where you stay in the middle, and as you absorb clay you get bigger and bigger, which means it gets harder and harder to stay alive and not get hit by the fire. You have to be quicker and quicker. After 3 hours I was really happy with what I ended up with. Next came the planning. So after all this time that I spent on my portfolio website while doing that game jam and a few bits and pieces there here and there, I ended up starting my main project. Now the previous year was Turtle Trial. I started working on that and really got into it. this year was Dungeon Farm Tycoon. Now, Dungeon Farm Tycoon was something that lasted absolutely months, but it was something that wasn't worked on intensively. It was something to do in the background while I was working on things, you know, in real life, trying to sort things out. I also challenged myself to make something that was more code intense than Turtle Trial. I obviously want to one up each time, and so I wanted to create a simulator game, since simulator games are one of the more harder things to code because there's so much to go that's going on and so many stats and things. So we started off with Turtle Trial. I ended up doing some planning, and then we got into the actual placement of videos. So if I were to quickly show off in the placement, the planning video, I basically covered lots of different tycoons, what makes them good, and kind of my goals, which I did end up hitting. I hit every single one, which was exactly what I wanted. If I quickly go into the Monster Descent, which was the next game jam I worked on, this was a 48-hour game jam. It was the Lame Jam 2, and this was a fun game that I worked on. Essentially, you know, we had that basic controls. I actually have the level selection, so you can choose what difficulty it was, and this was really difficult. So I ended up making sort of like a monster that goes around a planet, and the way this works is that the monster actually just rotates around the planet depending on what controls you're given, and you can go and try and kill a monster. I actually created my own monster in Blender, which I really enjoyed. I think it was really creepy and horrible, and I believe that was a theme monster. We have some particle effects when these little victims die, and the whole point was that you chase them and kill them. So I worked on a little bit more animation this game jam, and I created my own planet in Blender as well. Again, there was still more Dungeon Farm Tycoon, and we actually got into, if I show this, the actual development of it. So the basics of how the island looks was established pretty early on. I already had a good idea of what I wanted it to look like on a 2D plane, and then we move on to the next thing, which was the Soul Link. The Soul Link was a game jam that I did straight after the Monster Game Jam, about a month or two after, with Dungeon Farm Tycoon being made in the background. And essentially, this was a really fun idea that I came up with, where you link yourself to an enemy or to a trap or to a crystal which needs to be destroyed to progress, and you need to set yourself on fire, which I believe was the theme. You need to set yourself with fire using water, because I believe the theme was flammable water. So you use the water, you link yourself to these enemies or crystals, and then you burn them using the flammable water. If there's no link, then you take damage, and that was the whole concept of the idea. You can see it right here. But ultimately, I was really proud of what I made. So the Soul Link was actually a 5-day game jam, which is why I got to experiment with a new mechanic a lot more. And it was just the game jam. Now, after the Soul Link, there was more work that I did on Dungeon Farm Tycoon, specifically like stats and things. I don't want to go into too much detail. There's the pathfinding. Obviously, if you're interested, you could definitely look into the Dungeon Farm Tycoon game. Yeah, Dungeon Farm Tycoon is out now. It came out, I think it was on Christmas, and so you can definitely go and play it. So it was a week ago. And then what I did was one of my favourite videos, which is the Turtle Trial 2000 lines of code later. And this is where I went through every single script personally, but I also went through every major script on the video that required me to create this game. In the end, I was really surprised that it ended up being, I think it was 24,000, something like that, 23,000 lines of code. Which is a lot of code, and it just showed you how extensive, even though the game looks simple on the surface, just shows you how extensive the game was and how much work I had to put in to it. Dungeon Farm Tycoon is definitely up there with terms of code as well. It's definitely starting to become quite large in terms of code. But yeah, then I uploaded the second video, which was in even more detail, and then eventually I think I did a third video. And the third video was a nightmare to record because I ended up having a corruption issue. Hold on a second, there should be a part 3 for Turtle Trial Lines of Code. Did I not upload it? Did I forget? I had so much issues with it that I might have just forgotten to upload it. I actually have the part 3. I had a lot of trouble making part 3, for sure. It was one of my more difficult recordings I had to make, and it took a long time to record because I ended up, I think the footage got corrupted, and then when I tried to upload it I had issues. I must have just forgotten to re-upload it, the part 3, after I had to re-record it. I'll try and get that video uploaded after New Year's, but that video really should have been out by now. And it is ready. I just didn't notice. I was sure that I had already uploaded it. The next thing I did was I took part in the mini game jam, and this was around Halloween. And so I created a Halloween, a horror game essentially, where you get chased by a monster while you still got to collect things. So the whole point is that there's this creepy monster chasing you. And I worked hard on this game jam, and there was a unique mechanic of hiding again that I introduced. But also you had the enemy, sort of the monster chasing you, pathfinding to you, and you had this unique idea of the level constantly updating and changing, getting bigger and bigger with every few cores that you got, so core memories. And with everything that you got, you would be able to eventually progress, get all the cores and win. But there's also the monster which you could kill if you place blood down. So if you sacrifice some of your health, I believe 25%, you would be able to put a blood pool down which would damage the monster. While still working on making the Dungeon Farm Tycoon, we did I uploaded the videos of each day, and then we finally came up to this point right here, which is Christmas, which is reverse Christmas. The theme was opposite, so I went with reverse Christmas, and this was one of my favorite games I made this year. Essentially I used the assets from the previous Christmas game jam, and essentially that gave me a lot more free time since a lot of it was created by me anyway. A couple of them were just Christmas assets that were as well found online, and that gave me that freed a bunch of time. This one was really fun because it's actually separated into 2 types of games. So the first one is you're collecting presents, you're hiding away from these children, these naughty children that are trying to get their presents back, and you're actually stealing them to take with you to the North Pole, where you will turn your presents into coal. And this was really fun, so I used everything I learned from the monster game jam of essentially the 3D pathfinding, and of also using the mechanics of hiding to incorporate it into this game, as well as, you know, adding some new stuff, some other things as well. And so after I created this game here where you collect all the presents, there was a fun aspect of the next part being a factory. So then you would it would turn into a miniature tycoon in a sense, where you'd be able to buy upgrades. You would sort out the presents, place them into this factory where they get processed, turn it into coal, and that would be your score. And then you could use that the coal to heal yourself or to upgrade the overall factory and your player. And so I had a lot of fun with this. It was a crazy amount of fun. This was also a bit more of a relaxed game jam. I could take my time. I believe it was a week long, so I really could take my time. And I did upload a video breaking down everything as well. And yeah, it was 7 days. It was the Yogscast Game Jam 2021, which I always like to participate in. I think it's my 2nd or 3rd year participating in the Yogscast Game Jam. And I do enjoy it every time. So, and then finally we had our last look. The last look is the Dungeon Farm Tycoon's last video, where I talk about everything we'd worked on, the new levels, the tutorial, the dialogue, and kind of everything that is finished. And if you compare it to when I first showed it you to now, obviously we have our shop sorted, our objectives, bunch of stats, timing, we have our inventory managers, our speed, we have all of our placement working, our AI, NPCs are working, the pathfinding, all of our unique objects, which I actually created in as pixel art based on a free sprite sheet that was given. That's available on itch.io. I did link it in the video when I showed it off. And then I added a bunch of crafting as well. And of course there was the dungeon editor, which right here we have our dungeon editor. It's similar to the placement of shops, but and of all of our buildings, but also a whole new thing I had to design essentially. And then we have our unique 2D lighting that I added, and the monsters and their stats, and just so much more that was done overall. I wish there was more levels, but ultimately I had accomplished what I felt I had to do by the end of the year. And that is everything. That's everything I worked on during the year, and just a little bit before. It's a hell of a lot of things that I did, maybe not as much as the previous year, but there was a lot more going on this year outside of development that I had to do, but I still managed to work on quite a few things during development, and I'm really proud of what I accomplished. What I'm going to be doing from now on is, again, taking a little bit of a break from January to try and evaluate my situation, see how things are, try and update my website, and trying to sort out other things. During that time I'll probably be back, make a video maybe February, just to try and talk about what I'll be doing from there on. There will be a development highlight video just like I did for 2020 at some point next month, maybe February. Like I said, I won't be really working on uploading much. I will be trying to get the Turtles Lines of Code Part 3 out, because I didn't know that wasn't out already, so I'll be getting that out. It's available for everyone to watch, and I'll also be maybe doing a development highlights, but that'll probably be shown in February. So I believe that's everything. So this has been ProTaleDev, and I hope everyone has a great 2022. See you next time.